Tony Ferguson is known as one of the best, toughest, most resilient fighters of all time. He puts the most entertaining fights. He is one of the most entertaining guys outside of the octagon. Wearing sunglasses indoors, kicking metal pipes to heal a broken leg, and somehow taking this damage and being this tough helped him become a world champion. But also, he might have costed him a lot of his career. And it all started with an unconventional childhood, to be honest.
I'm from Oxnard, bitch.
Not much really is known about his dad. His mom would marry a Swedish guy that would become his stepdad, and they would move to Moscow, Michigan. And his dad was a big country worker.
Yeah, that's why I had to cut cords of wood. A cord of wood is like a stack of wood. And so we had to do that, and then we had to stack wood in the face. So he did it on purpose. I'm gonna raise you this way so that way you know exactly what you don't want to do.
And I've always been a fighter since I was little, and I've always had the support of my family, and that just makes it just a killer combination.
So he would have Tony do all the work with him and build that work ethic. Work ethic that he would be known for the rest of his life. Along with this, now Tony Ferguson was left out in a town of Michigan that did not have a lot of Hispanic kids.
For me, being little, I always wanted to be boxer. You know, I have, like Fernando Vargas, Oscar De La Hoya, and you had like Trinidad, and you had a lot of these different boxers that were there, and I was just like, man, I want to be that guy. You know, they just had like a different aura about them, just a personality that you just like, man.
So if I didn't have that visual to see what it was like, I would have never been able to get there. But I had people create that visual for me.
I bought a speed bag when I was about 15 years old.
So it was always watching movies and I had a speed bag, in a speed bag.
Tony just quits college and decides to get more involved in the party life and become a bartender.
When I weighed about 205 pounds.
See, I can't believe that.
I was about 205 pounds. I was smoking cigars, wasting money on stupid shit,
Yeah.
stupid stuff.
Right.
It just wasn't me anymore. So I was like, you know, I'm gonna go back to California where my family's at.
And I go into this bar with my cousin. I was looking for a bartending job. I go in there and he's like, no, we don't have any bartending spots open. He's like, you wanna be a security guard? You look like, you know, you can handle your business with your ears. And I said, nah, I'm not interested. He hands me a West Coast Jiu-Jitsu card.
I looked at the card and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go.
Walked right in.
Had holes in my jeans, I had a cut off t-shirt, looked like fresh off the boat.
And this guy comes over, his name is Rafulio. He said, where's your gloves, kid? I said, I don't have any, I was using the ones in Lost and Found. And he goes, turns around, he comes back, and he had a brand new pair of ringside boxing gloves. And mind you, I had like maybe $5 to my name. He's my grandma's card, and he gives me these gloves. And it was the coolest thing that anybody could have ever did to give me the tools that I needed to get into fighting.
Tony Ferguson is known as one of the best, toughest, most resilient fighters of all time. He puts the most entertaining fights. He is one of the most entertaining guys outside of the octagon. Wearing sunglasses indoors, kicking metal pipes to heal a broken leg, and somehow taking this damage and being this tough helped him become a world champion. But also, he might have costed him a lot of his career. And it all started with an unconventional childhood, to be honest.
I'm from Oxnard, bitch.
Not much really is known about his dad. His mom would marry a Swedish guy that would become his stepdad, and they would move to Moscow, Michigan. And his dad was a big country worker.
Yeah, that's why I had to cut cords of wood. A cord of wood is like a stack of wood. And so we had to do that, and then we had to stack wood in the face. So he did it on purpose. I'm gonna raise you this way so that way you know exactly what you don't want to do.
And I've always been a fighter since I was little, and I've always had the support of my family, and that just makes it just a killer combination.
So he would have Tony do all the work with him and build that work ethic. Work ethic that he would be known for the rest of his life. Along with this, now Tony Ferguson was left out in a town of Michigan that did not have a lot of Hispanic kids.
For me, being little, I always wanted to be boxer. You know, I have, like Fernando Vargas, Oscar De La Hoya, and you had like Trinidad, and you had a lot of these different boxers that were there, and I was just like, man, I want to be that guy. You know, they just had like a different aura about them, just a personality that you just like, man.
So if I didn't have that visual to see what it was like, I would have never been able to get there. I had people create that visual for me.
I bought a speed bag when I was about 15 years old.
So it was always watching movies and I had a speed bag.
Tony just quits college and decides to get more involved in the party life and become a bartender.
I weighed about 205 pounds.
See, I can't believe that.
I was about 205 pounds. I was smoking cigars, wasting money on stupid shit,
Yeah.
stupid stuff.
Right.
It just wasn't me anymore. So I was like, you know, I'm gonna go back to California where my family's at.
And I go into this bar with my cousin. I was looking for a bartending job. I go in there and he's like, no, we don't have any bartending spots open. He's like, you want to be a security guard? You look like, you know, you can handle your business with your ears. And I said, nah, I'm not interested. He hands me a West Coast Jiu-Jitsu card.
I looked at the card and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go.
Walked right in.
Had holes in my jeans, I had a cut off t-shirt, looked like fresh off the boat.
This guy comes over, his name is Rafuyo. He said, where's your gloves, kid? I said, I don't have any. I was using the ones that I lost and found. He goes, turns around and comes back and he had a brand new pair of ringside boxing gloves. And mind you, I had like maybe $5 to my name. He's my grandma's card, and he gives me these gloves. And it was the coolest thing that anybody could have ever did to give me the tools that I needed to get into fighting.
And it was the only opportunity I ever asked for. Anytime anybody gave me an opportunity, I used it. I never let it go to waste. And it was like the golden opportunity for me to accept that my reality is I am an athlete, I am a professional, and this is where I belong.
I went back home, told my parents, because they were the only ones that really mattered. I was like, you know what, all these other jobs, these side jobs are bullshit. Because I'm an athlete, I'm a professional athlete.
Tony called himself a professional athlete before he actually was.
I'm trying to get into the UFC. I try and say you will be. I'd rather see that.
Made that decision and man, took a big ass chance. You know, barely making rent, barely paying the phone bill, but
From that moment on, it was just music to my ears.
I was an amateur fighter, dude. I was working at Coffee Bean, lifting green coffee off of the semi-trucks onto pallets. I was just like, had all these random odd jobs, but it was always like I was lifting. And I would do it, and I would handle like 100 and some odd bags. Going to sound was getting beefy.
Tony Ferguson hears about the UFC TV show, the reality show called The Ultimate Fighter.
I'd never watched the show. I didn't know what was going on. I talked to my coach. I was like, hey, I'm gonna try out for the show. He's like, you know what the show is, right? And I was like, no, I just know it's what I have to do to get in the UFC.
Survive off of like $5 a day. But it was that hunger that kept me on top of everything.
Tony already had to believe in himself that he was a professional athlete before he even actually was one. And he decides to apply for it. He didn't really have a clue on what he was doing, so he got rejected. And as he goes and steps in the ring for the first time, he gets beat. He would injure his leg in the fight, but he would go to the bar and meet a girl that would change the rest of his life. Tony applies for the Ultimate Fighter again, but gets rejected. So what does Tony do? He applies for the Ultimate Fighter again. Now don't get me wrong, Tony was a beast in the octagon, but found himself in bad situations at the Ultimate Fighter house.
Tony, don't start a fight.
Are you getting serious?
You good?
Are you good?
He's looking at you. Are
Are
you,
you really getting serious?
Tony?
Look at me.
Be nice.
Look at me.
But then you see somebody's true colors when they start drinking, and Tony definitely got way out of hand.
Where's your kid at?
Clean it for you.
Where's your kid at?
Tony, you know, bringing up my son was definitely below the belt.
Back then, his teammate was in a custody battle, and bringing this up when he was drunk was not ideal.
You don't talk about another man's son. Where's your kid at? Don't say it. Say it. Where's your kid at? Don't say it. Tony, relax, dude.
Shocked at Tony that he switched like that, so it's completely another person.
Little did they know that this would become a common theme even when sober later on in his career. Tony Ferguson completely wipes the Ultimate Fighter and wins it all, getting the contract.
Fighting in the show's finale.
I kept a lot of stuff bottled up and I brought a lot of inner demons with me inside there. But every single fight, what I did was I tried to fight them out. You don't leave it all out there.
It's all over! Tony Ferguson is the Ultimate Fighter! Wow!
And instead of being super happy about it, he would have another incident. He flew home to his parents in Michigan and was allegedly removed out of the airplane because of his outburst. He was prescribed with risperidone, a medication that can be used to treat schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. This would help Tony Ferguson stay on a stable mental state, and he would get married to his wife and be a way better man now. And this coincides with Tony's rise in the UFC. At this point though, people are still thinking that he's a little bit crazy. There's something a little bit off with him.
And Eddie said he's never seen anything like this guy. Yeah. He said the guy trains for 6 hours a day.
Yeah. He's legit crazy.
Yes.
Like, I don't know if he feels pain. That kind of crazy.
They do these hill sprints, and he said he laps everybody. He goes all the way to the top before they do, goes down, and then beats them on the way up.
And as Tony Ferguson is making his way to the top of the card, he's faced with a fighter that would debut in the UFC 1 year after Tony did. In 2015, Tony is set to fight Khabib Nurmagomedov. But Khabib Nurmagomedov gets injured and has to pull out of the fight. Khabib would be inactive for 2 years, and Tony would go on to have a family and welcome a kid. Then a second fight is scheduled with Khabib in 2016. And this time, Tony pulls out with a freak lung injury.
What was your reaction when you found out that Tony was pulling out of the fight?
I'm so upset about this because I finally won fight Tony Ferguson. I really want this fight.
That's when another notorious, if you will, character will enter the picture and face Khabib Nurmagomedov, and he becomes the world champion. But as Conor becomes a champ, he pursues a fight in boxing for more money, which makes him inactive in the UFC.
Defend or vacate. That's what I've always been saying. If you don't hold that belt for a certain amount of time, you gotta let it go, son.
I think they're gonna strip him because Conor's got $100 million in the bank. Yeah. And I think he's having fun. But I think Khabib versus Tony is the big fight.
Everybody's been waiting to see that fight.
Yeah, that's a good fight.
This time for the lightweight title, Khabib Nurmagomedov against Tony Ferguson for the third time. Tony Ferguson makes his weight and goes to sleep and wakes up to terrible news.
And as soon as I woke up from the nap, I'm like, man, what the hell? Like, people look like they're like somebody died or something, and they were like, Tony, Khabib is sick. He went to the hospital.
What went through your mind when you got that news?
I thought it was a nightmare, man. Something worse than El Cucuy.
If you're Tony Ferguson and your mindset is you're gonna fight Khabib for the title, obviously there's more money involved in that fight and the whole deal, it's devastating.
I'm a man, I have a family support, and I know I understand it's a business, but the time and the effort that I put into this, and especially Khabib, just kind of sucks.
Tony Ferguson is actually very supportive to Khabib at this point, but then sees this video and changes his mind.
How many? Three? Three tiramisu. This is Russian style. Before it, we eat tiramisu.
But after I found out it was due to just being unprofessional and stuff, then it started sinking in. Then I started getting mad, started hitting the bags.
Tony Ferguson would still need to get paid, so he gets replaced with Kevin Lee. Ferguson chokes him out. Tony now is UFC world champion in the meantime, but he still has to prove himself against Khabib Nurmagomedov. Tony Ferguson is literally doing promotions for Fight Week as he trips over a cable and tears his ACL.
When did you find out that Tony Ferguson was injured and might be out of the fight? When did you first hear about this?
It is April 1st, which I'm sure many of you know is April Fool's Day.
Did you think it was a joke at first? Like, was
first,
it hard?
yes. I think first, because 1st April.
Yeah.
There are no April Fool's jokes here today. This interview is entirely legitimate, correct?
Unfortunately it is, yes.
He's out. I can't believe, how he's out. Everything is finished.
He tore his LCL, and apparently that's an injury that you don't need surgery on, but he actually tore it off the bone. He's gonna need surgery.
What Dana said was very savage.
What'd he say?
Dana said he wears those sunglasses indoors. That should happen to everybody that wears sunglasses indoors.
Khabib still does the fight, but Khabib gets attacked by McGregor, and that makes it clear that the next fight has to be Khabib against McGregor, essentially putting Tony Ferguson in an interesting pickle where he never actually lost the belt, but he's no longer the champion. Tony Ferguson goes on to have one of the most entertaining fights in the history in the UFC against Pettis. Ferguson and Pettis go toe-to-toe and hit each other in the head repeatedly, making for great TV, but terrible for your brain. And it just happens that around this time, his wife expresses a lot of concerns when it comes to Tony's mental health.
Okay, I just want to explain one thing. I actually left the location with my son. I was not comfortable with it anymore.
Okay.
He is a professional fighter.
Okay, and is he there by himself, or is there anyone else there?
No, he's there with friends, or just the dogs. But he's there by himself.
And it's your husband?
Yeah, it's my husband.
What's
so that's
his
what I'm
name?
saying. I just want to let you guys know he's a professional fighter because, one, I don't want no cop to get injured.
She said at that time, he was also drinking heavily, that Tony started thinking she was evil and would not let her shower or go in the bathroom alone. On the 5th of February, Tony's wife wrote that he woke up her and their sons up in the middle of the night and demanded to leave the house because they weren't safe. He believed there would be a great flood due to the lunar eclipse and would purchase a life raft and drive the family away to the Palm Desert. Tony promised that if there was no flood, he would actually agree into getting his mental issues taken care of. But even with that being said, he refused. On the 12th, Tony had what Christina called a psychotic break or a panic attack. He screamed at her face, swearing at her, and believed she was someone else, he wrote. I woke up late that night. Standing over me was Tony accusing me of being a witch. February 16th, he unplugged the fridge, turned off half the power of the entire home, saying that there was camera in the fridge and in the ceiling fans. Ferguson allegedly tore the vanity mirror off the bathroom wall because he believed there was something behind it. He took his own food away because he thought it was poison. Christina told the cops that Tony just kept throwing quote-unquote holy water at her. The officers told her to go see a doctor, and she agreed to do at the time. 3 days after that, Tony was unable to sleep and believed that somebody had placed a chip on his injured leg. On February 19th, Tony Ferguson agreed, allegedly, to be taken to a psychiatrical help at Keg Medical Center in USC. But while on the way there, they got stuck in traffic and Tony Ferguson just jumped out of the car and disappeared. His wife, Christina, sadly would release a restraining order against Tony Ferguson and would release this statement. Tony Ferguson is a good husband. Her son and the current legal proceedings are part of the process to ensure that Tony will get the help necessary to continue being the best possible. Tony Ferguson against Khabib Nurmagomedov 5.
We're keeping it sweet, keeping it savvy, and we'll keep it a little classy. I'm glad you showed up.
You seem to be in really great spirits. I commend you for going headfirst into some mental health issues and working through that. It takes a lot of courage as a professional athlete, especially. A lot of people look up to you. I was giving you props. I was just wondering.
The advice. Next question.
I wasn't giving you advice, sir. Sorry. Okay.
This guy become a little bit old. Only this one, he 36, 37 years old. When I beat him, people gonna talk about like, oh, he's old.
When I start having 21-year-olds outrun me, outwork me, and all this other good stuff, then we can talk. Family, friends, whatever, can always gonna have their opinions, but it doesn't matter. Depends on how much your mental toughness is out there competing, and then what you're gonna do with it.
Like fighter, I respect him, but like human being, I don't understand this guy. He a little bit stupid without his mind,
This is the fifth time they've scheduled this fight.
Hey,
That's
you know
crazy.
what they say, right? Fifth time's the charm.
Yeah, I forgot to mention this. This is 2020.
Today we got a call from the highest level you can go at Disney and the highest level of ESPN. And the powers that be there asked me to stand down and not do this event next Saturday.
UFC 249 has been canceled. All UFC events postponed indefinitely due to COVID-19. Dana White says he's ready to promote the event, but things were taken out of his control.
When you found out that Khabib Nurmagomedov wouldn't be able to fight at UFC 249, that he was back home in Russia and appears now for the 5th time, the fight is off.
He does not want to fight. I guarantee you this dude's going to try to retire, man, without fighting.
I'm starting to believe Joe Rogan that this fight is cursed. And, you and I were here 2 years ago having this conversation when the fight was canceled.
Tony Ferguson, even the world was stopped, he was still going to make weight for the fight. The UFC would replace Khabib with the most violent fighter of all time, Justin Gaethje. And now Tony has to make weight again only 3 weeks after he did for Khabib. And in this fight is where this sad story ends. Not because Tony passed away or anything of that sort, but because from here, it all goes downhill. He has nothing else to lose.
He gonna come back, someone gonna beat him again, I believe. Because when you take damage like this, you never gonna be same. Never, ever. Even if you're Tony Ferguson.
And Khabib has a point. At this point, I don't think anybody else expected him to be the same. Tony shaved his head and got ready for his next fight.
What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong?
He would become even a little delusional. And then one of the most devastating kicks of all time would catch Tony. He would get finished multiple times. Tony, at this point, had lost it pretty much everything. Tony would fade into darkness. But you might be interested in these 2 videos, so check them out.
Tony, you know this, right? You don't need me to tell you this. People love you. Like, people genuinely love you. The fans love you. They have your back. When you speak, they listen. They really do love you. And the loyalty that your fan base has for you is pretty incredible. So I hope you recognize that a lot of people have your back. A lot of people want to see you happy, want to see you succeed.
That's crazy.
And want to support you. So I hope you know that.